Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great time. I'm here to talk to you about continuous pen testing and attack surface management. Basically, offensive security operations and how pen testing is done in the future and currently, right now, for some. First of all, who am I? My name is Chris Dale. I'm actually casting out of Norway right now. I'm at a hackerspace. I'm surrounded by a bunch of people. They're all drinking beer. They're all listening to me talking. And we're having a blast here at perhaps one of the most beautiful villas and locations in Norway at the moment. So if you hear people in the background chatter and stuff, it's just audience, physical audience together with us here online on the webcast. So my name is Chris Dale. I'm the Chief Hacking Officer at River Security, a company that does exclusively pen testing and incident response. I am also a principal instructor at SANS. I got an alphabet soup of different certifications, but in general, just know that I teach and I pen test and I do incident response. All right. So that's a little bit about myself. I love to do pen testing, but I hate to do it the old traditional way because it just doesn't work. And that's what we're going to get into today. Also, my company, the people that I'm surrounded with, River Security, this is the team, right? And I've been told that we look like a massage institute. So this picture, scrapped it really fast, and I got this picture instead. That looks a little bit better. Like, we're tough guys, we're all Norwegians, we're all pen testers pretty much, and we're helping customers understand their exposure, their vulnerabilities, security hygiene versus actual compromise on confidentiality, integrity, availability, etc. So now you know about us. Make it known. River Security, here we are. Awesome, great group of people. Now, into the presentation. Everybody, I want you to think long and hard about this simple, stupid question. Why do we do pen testing? What's the point? Honestly, why do we do it? What is the purpose? Compliance, all right. To find vulnerabilities, great. Some people might even say, so that the threat actors can't break in, right? Think about why we're spending large amounts of money hiring technical people to go in and figure out if there's any vulnerabilities or not. And how does pen testing, well, secure the objective of not allowing threat actors to break in? Do we even do a good job on that? The moment you hit print on a pen test report, wouldn't you say that that pen test report is stale? It's old? Somebody goes in, patches the firewall a moment later, and the pen test results are old. A vulnerability was released a moment later, and the pen test report is old. Pen testing, does it even work? Legit question. There are many problems with pen testing, right? Penetration testing has rubbed me the wrong way for many, many years. And I've been a sole provider of pen tests. This has been my living for many years. And my delivery is rubbing me the wrong way. One of the challenges that I've seen on the other end of the table, as a CISO, for example, is the fact that I invite a company to come in and pen test my company. So I worked several years as a security information security officer. I invite companies to come in and present their offers on having a pen test against the company. You know, what they do is that they come in and they interrogate me on scoping. They want to ask me, what systems do you want to have in scope, dear Mr. CISO? And I'm like, everything, you know? Surely you can't mean everything in scope. I mean, your budgets are not that high, I must assume, right? All right, so then I have to, as a CISO, carefully figure out what I want to have included in my scope. So I'll select systems like my breastplate, my front, websites, and I'll have some other important support systems, and I'll have those in scope, and they'll quote me up on a price, and I'll say, go ahead, do the pen test, and they'll do it in a week or two, right? So that left me a little bit concerned. What about the other systems? Are they secure? And also, once the pen test was done, is it still secure? All right. So I had to do that several times. At least once a year, I had to procure external pen testers. And I was constantly challenged about the scope. And it was actually annoying figuring out the scope of the pen test. I didn't feel like this company that I would hire would actually do me the best service of protecting me against threat actors. Then I said, all right, worked as a CISO for a couple of years. I need to do something else. I started working as a pen tester, consultant, and incident responder. I'm now the provider of pen tests. And guess what the discussions that I had with my customers were all about? It was all about scoping. What is this going to cost? How much is in scope? And how do you even figure out the scope if you haven't started the engagement? Has anybody thought about things like shadow IT assets, which the customer doesn't know about, but you might have exposed on the internet with gaping vulnerabilities that could be exploited by anybody? What about such systems which will never be included in a scope of a pen test? And furthermore, the attackers, do they even care about the scope? Do real threat actors consider scope one of their parameters in whether or not they're going to break into your system or not? Of course not. So the whole scoping debacle, the whole scoping issue is, to be frankly, and to speak frankly with you, it's ridiculous. But we got to have the scope, right? I'm sure many of you are thinking right now, we got to have the scope. We'll talk about it. We'll get there. Just tune in for the rest of this webcast and we'll get to it. Pen testing methodology currently is in a state of not being developed very much. If you go Google right now, pen test methodology, you will be met with articles written in 2025, 2024, brand new articles citing, pretty much all of them, citing an extremely important topic called reconnaissance, discovery, figuring out what the target is all about, which systems they might have in scope. They will feature the pen test methodology in beautiful graphics like these, where they'll talk about pre-engagement and planning, in other words, scoping. They'll talk about intelligence gathering, and then they'll talk about basically how to do the pen test in the best way possible. But then go back to your own pen tests that you have procured and ask yourselves, when was the last time somebody did a reconnaissance engagement against you? When was the last time somebody went out there and did some, well, information gathering and tried to figure out, can we hack this target by just Googling for them? Can we hack this target by just going out there on the wide internet and seeing what is out there? And most likely, you don't buy pen tests where recon and scanning and discovery in a pre-planning phases is even included. You basically go in and select a set of assets and you get the pen testing done. Then you can go further into the actual methodologies to study. For example, the pen testing execution standard. I have been a kind Norwegian Chris today, and I've redacted the logos from the companies that expose this because, well, I don't want to expose anybody here, okay? It's okay to do mistakes. And our industry don't currently know that we're making mistakes. But take, for example, some of these top 5 best pen test methodologies out there. You will see currently that companies that are your providers are citing that they're following the pen test execution standard, for example, for their pen tests. All right, here's one of many companies that are talking about the PTES. They will talk about how these methodologies will help them figure out if there's any vulnerabilities. And there are many methodologies out there. Like, for example, here, we're looking at PTES, we're looking at NIST, we're looking at ISAF, we're looking at OSSTM, and others. And what about these methodologies? Do they contain reconnaissance? Do they contain discovery of assets and so on? They do. Here, from this company here, we're talking about a company that does continuous pen testing, that makes the chaotic pen tests a breeze with hacker-style vulnerability scanners. I absolutely do not like this. Automating pen testing, I'm sorry, but it doesn't work like that, okay? It doesn't work by making a glorified vulnerability scanner. That is not what we're going to talk about today. Let's jump into the methodologies here. PTES, OSSTMM. Take a look at these methodologies these companies are touting that we need to use, and we're currently using in our pen test. This one here, OSSTMM, is from 2010. It's 15 years old. Take a look at OWASP, the Open Worldwide Application Security Project. They actually renamed themselves recently. It is no longer the Open Web App Security Project, okay? But take a look at this methodology and see how they're very much checklist based, and they're not in any regards agile, and they're all referencing things like OSS, TMM, they're referencing PTES and so on. Here on the slide from OWASP, which you can see that this content represents the latest contributions to the Web Security Testing Guide. It may frequently change, which it should, mind you. It must frequently change. Look at this methodology from OWASP. It is currently referencing PTES, Pen Testing Execution Standard. So let's go in and study the Pen Testing Execution Standard, shall we? Here we got the website. The website was offline, unfortunately, the other day when I was trying to browse it, so I had to use archive.org. But no kidding, open up the website right now and you will see that this methodology haven't updated in the past 11 years. I'm not saying the people behind the methodology didn't do a good thing, that they're not smart, because they're all brilliant people, actually, famous, renowned people in our industry whom I highly respect and regards. But this methodology will not give you a pen test which gives or yields high results. You're going to get crappy results. You're going to get a pen test which you do not deserve. Here, I'm browsing the technical guidelines. Cross-site scripting, contributions needed, SQL injection, wall of text. This will not work, my friends. And it's a shame that our industry has become dinosaurs that are not agile, which development has become and IT's operations have become. I'm actually a bit like, ruffled up, you know? This will not work. This is not how it's done. Following checklists like this from OWASP, where we go through, check for this, check for this, check for this, it doesn't work. It's like we are dinosaurs on the slide right now, and the real threat actors are rabbits running circles around our legs. We're playing badminton like this handsome older gentleman right now. That is pen testers, okay? Very cute, very nice. But the threat actors are playing tennis. They're playing a completely different sport. Pen testing sucks if we continue in these old ways. So there are many ways to help improve, okay? And to fix methodology, long live the king, because the old king is dead. There's a new methodology in town. I've done a legit attempt of creating a timeless methodology that allows pen testers to undergo creative processes pertaining whatever technology that they're faced with, which doesn't necessarily rely on checklists and old methodologies that run stale the moment they're written. So please, I encourage you to check out the link, check out the methodology, contribute feedback on it, and you will see that a more timeless and more abstract methodology that will share the vision between pen testers in our execution of our testing will definitively lift the pen testing results. However, that is not what we're going to talk about today. In fact, that's an entirely different presentation. You will find if you click the link or scan the QR, you can trust me, I won't hack you, okay? I will not hack you unless you pay me. It's that simple. And right now, none of you are paying clients. So safe links to click. Don't worry about it. But that link contains a link to another presentation about a new methodology that will hopefully align the pen testers' minds in terms of how to conduct a more actionable pen test that delivers high results instead of, well, bad results. Customers today look at themselves like this. This is a traditional company out there. They got an insider team working at the SOC, for example. They're paying attention. They see some people breaking in, perhaps. They have some cyber threat intelligence. They're doing a decent job trying to detect if somebody's trying to break in. They have some monitoring in place. You can see that there's some defenses in here. The door is close to the castle. There's some alligators in the moat around the castle. Everything looks great from this point of view. In this talk, we will look at how to defend forward, how to leave that castle and get a much better perspective from what kind of vulnerabilities actually exist out there. What does the attacker see? Exposure management, attack surface management. What can we see from the point of view when we leave the castle? And clearly, when we leave this castle, we can see that the defenses that we started building were never really followed up that good. You know, we didn't continue building our walls like we should have done. In fact, there are some gaping vulnerabilities on the east side of this castle, vulnerabilities that are currently being exploited or can be exploited. Ask any pen tester that you want. I don't care what methodology they follow. Ask any pen tester you want if they've ever been able to hack a company by simply Googling for them or searching for them or doing not trivial hacking, okay? And most likely they will answer yes. There's been several cases where breaking into a company was dead simple. And we gotta, at the very least, as pen testers, find those gaping vulnerabilities. What about the hole in the middle of the castle wall? There are vulnerabilities out there. Scanners will find them. There are vulnerabilities out there which me, as a pen tester, I'm not tall enough to climb through. The vulnerability in the middle of the castle right now, sorry to say, I'm not skilled enough to exploit it. I might report it to you, saying, hey, there's a vulnerability, by the way. I'm not tall enough to enter. There might be some nation state, some APT, somebody who's better at pen testing than me who can exploit it. You should patch it, but I can't exploit it, so you probably don't need to patch it tomorrow. All right? It's a security hygienic issue. The moment that gaping vulnerability in the middle of the castle wall becomes what we call known exploitable, it becomes a KEV. When CISA.gov or the National Security Authority says, everybody patch Ivanti now, all right? Let's get to business and patch those systems now. Ideally, we would patch everything, but that's just not the world we live in, my friends. We cannot patch everything. Some patches actually cause outages and availability issues and can introduce a range of different problems. So we have to do a better job in prioritizing what to patch when, and pen testers have a way to contribute here. In fact, this castle is in a modern company no longer a castle. You know, the analogy is dead. This castle, you know, has all kinds of clouds on top of it, which is siphoning in data, taking data out. There's all kinds of villages surrounding this castle, which enables or which breaks these castle walls, but can often be found from the outside. So my proposal to the industry, and this is something that I have done now for many years, is to stop doing pen testing. Stop doing the traditional pen tests and instead look at the company from an attack surface management point of view. Let your pen testers work against the target company from a point of view of finding all available assets, a digital footprint assessment. That is what I started doing many years ago. I told my customers, you don't need a pen test, really. You know, you want a pen test, you think you want a pen test, but why don't you just let me get into your brand a little bit. From an internet point of view, I'll get into your brand and I will take a stab at your brand. Let me see what I can find. I won't necessarily exploit. I won't necessarily deploy backdoors in your company, but I want to go wide and I want to go fast. I want to Google you. I want to scan you. I want to find all your available assets and put it through a list which is prioritized from my point of view. Call it the smell test if you want to. I will smell, I might look, and if it looks bad and it smells bad, it probably is bad, right? I don't necessarily have to penetrate it to determine it's bad. Immediate value, bottom-up approach. You do reconnaissance, scanning, and discovery. You let your pen testers do open source intelligence. You go wide against the brand, not the domains, not the IP addresses, but you find it all. That might now allow you to prioritize which systems you have in scope for the pen test, which might come afterwards. To be honest with you, many of our customers didn't even buy a pen test afterwards. The value from a digital footprint assessment was value enough for them to work throughout the year to get stuff done, to fix vulnerabilities, build defenses, build secure access service edges, zero trust networking, and so on. But anyways, maybe you'll select some assets to have in scope, but more importantly, you will now know which assets which you don't include in your scope for the pen test, because those systems you need to know about. And also we'll find shadow IT, we'll find all of that old stuff that you thought you removed from the internet, but is still available out there. I really like this one approach here. It sets the stage for the topics we're going to get into next: attack surface management and continuous pen testing. I just wanted you to know a little bit about the history of how, well, pen testing is developing into not being a pen test anymore, but more like recon exercises and then pen testing exercises. And then we'll talk about the topics of the webcast now shortly. This bottom-up approach might be cheaper for the customers. You might give more value to your customers, and it produces nice overviews. For example, like this here, I have a little flow chart of a target customer showing a range of different systems in scope. It gives a great bird's eye perspective. You can flag out a bunch of different vulnerabilities. Like, for example, here, I found a power plant, not just one, several online. And that's when people go, oh, I'm not sure if I want this anymore. Because are you going to find my production systems? What if you crash them? What if you do something wrong on the power plant? What if you do something that breaks it? Whatever, okay? And I got news for you. If your systems are online, like this power plant, where we have read and write access to the PLC running the power plant, I'm not going to hack it, okay? I'm not going to hack it like we did here, where one of my colleagues, Richard, broke into the power plant, okay? We're not going to do that. We're just going to phone up the CTO, the CISO, and say, your power plant is online. Put it offline. And you'll nod and you go, oh, yeah, it shouldn't be online, okay? And there's also news. Attackers are already doing this. You're already getting scanned over and over and over again by universities, by bug bounty hunters, by criminals, by Shodan and Census and all the big ones. You are getting attacked right now. So if professionals come in and they find your critical stuff, it's pretty okay. It's not the worst. Pen testing needs to be inspired by the military. We need to look at warfare and let ourselves be inspired. In fact, at my company, we look at pen testing as a continuous cycle of activities. We need to capture information and discover changes. I got to ask myself, what about now? Can I hack a customer now? No? What about now? New cyber threat intel. Can I hack a customer now? No? I'm going to continuously capture data. DEF CON was just on. James Kettle from Portsmouth was just on stage, released a new hacking technique. Can I hack my customer now? You capture information, you analyze the information, and ask yourselves, can I hack? Devise a plan, figure out the exploit, and so on. Preemptively alert if you need to. But if the customer, the receiving party of this continuous activity, acts on the news before there is a threat actor who will capture, analyze, plan, and actually exploit, if you patch before they can do the same loop, guess what? We won the fight that day. And every day there are dozens of different fights. IT changes. And this is where we get into attack surface management. We take our asset inventory and we use automation and clever algorithms and platforms to help us continuously take the digital footprint and put on some automation and perhaps manual review, and we call it attack surface management. This little meerkat in the background is always scouting, looking for your new domains, your IP addresses, any missing patches, vulnerability scanning, and so on. All of that good stuff, it will happen over time. We are taking the pentest methodology, which I'm now viewing from a very abstract point of view. We're taking reconnaissance, which we should have been doing from the start. We're doing discovery and scanning, and we're doing it continuously. And this is a great idea. And then enter continuous pen testing. We hand that meerkat a gun, okay? So no longer they're only watching, but we're also gonna weaponize. Not fully automated, okay? It doesn't work. You might think it works, it doesn't. Use humans, use automation, and use AI together in a nice, beautiful triangle, and it will work. But you give that meerkat here a gun, you take attack surface management, and you test all changes, and all of a sudden, you now have continuity in your pen testing. In fact, we call this a offensive SOC, a security operations center whose alerts are opportunities to hack. Interesting. In fact, weaponizing that final part of the methodology, putting it all together, allowing us to focus on a target brand, ideally a brand, not just, I want this domain in scope, I want these IP addresses in scope. No, no, no. Let pen testers be pen testers. Don't handicap them, okay? And we will figure out the legality in what assets we find. Are we allowed to break into this? Do we have jurisdiction to break into this? Can I even weaponize my automation on this asset, or does it belong to somebody else? Do I need to have the customer's approval on this asset? Do I need to identify this asset and then ask you in advance? We'll figure that stuff out. Not you, we. This here is actually how some pen testing companies like River Security do it now. And it was all inspired by the guy you see on the picture on stage right now, Rob Joyce. Rob Joyce might not know it, but he inspired the continuity in pen testing with this one talk that you can find on YouTube here from Usenix Enigma 2016. He's basically presenting a talk on how to protect against nation-state attackers like themselves. Rob Joyce is the chief tailored access operator of the NSA. He's the one in charge of the hacking teams in the NSA, perhaps the most revered pen testing team in the world, okay? He's on stage talking about how to protect yourself against them. It's a brilliant talk. And he has many moments where he discusses things like, to successfully protect against a nation-state attacker, you have to do asset inventory. Duh, yeah, you have to know yourself. And he explains why they're successful. They're an APT, an advanced persistent threat. And the reason why they're successful is not because they're more advanced than everybody else, because they are. They have more 0 days than anybody else, I must imagine, okay? But that's not why they're successful. It's the P in APT, the persistence part. Because they're more persistent than everybody else. They don't need to find a vulnerability today or tomorrow. They know there will be a vulnerability in the next 3 months. They just have to patiently wait, and there will be an opportunity to break in without wasting a very expensive 0-day type of exploit. In fact, when they're done with the target, the pen testers know the target better than the target knows themselves. Let that inspire you, because that's how it's gonna work in the future of pen testing. We'll talk about that more closely in a few slides. But one thing is for certain, we need to bring agility into pen testing, okay? Our teams of developers, our teams of operations are hyper agile today, releasing to production perhaps several times a week, perhaps several times a day. And pen testing is not agile at all in most cases. Some pen testing teams might we'll do a quarterly pen test. No, we'll do a pen test every month. But it's not right. Also, a question I get all the time is, how often should you scan and so on? No, we'll talk about those things. It's not how it is. And how do you scale even an agile operation like this? Let's get into the details, okay? Because this type of offensive pen test operation, which is going to be hyper agile, testing, well, micro pen testing every day where there is a need for pen testing, has to scale somehow. And to make it scale, one of the techniques that you can use to scale it up is to say that, look, once you operate the pen testing team or authorize them to pen test you throughout the year instead of once a year, you will say things like, we're going to pen test the delta. We're going to test all changes and new things we introduce to the internet. We're going to pen test those changes ASAP. But then, Chris, what about the old? Okay. What about all the existing systems that we have online? I want them pen tested too. And then I will go back to one of my first slides and say, you're not that rich. You can't afford it. We can't pen test everything. It's a too big scope. So what about the old? Let the old be old. It's on the internet right now. It might get hacked. Yes, we'll find those assets. We will use automation to flag out potential security, hygienic issues and so on. But once there is change in, say, cyber threat intelligence, once there is a new vulnerability out there, once there is some new opportunity, we'll take that opportunity and apply it to all the old. All the existing assets that you have will now have pen testers look at the old and see, have I now been weaponized with an opportunity to break the old? And of course, we'll do all kinds of hunts also in the meantime. We'll see if we can hack, it might be that we do a little bit of a hunting based on some cool exercises, but to scale it up, focus on the deltas and hunt on the old in general is a great way to scale a continuous pen testing type of operation. And to get this done, I want to let you know how River Security has built this kind of tooling, how we have weaponized our pen testers to have what I would call, like, we're trying to build one of the best pen testing tools in the world. How? By having a data lake. I need to take any tool, technique, any type of sensor, any leak credential, any cyber threat intel data. I need to have freedom as a pen tester to take what I have currently in my toolbox and feed it into storage, not structured data, into something we would call a data lake. Imagine JSON documents being put into a data lake, which I can now configure and query upon. I can now go in and configure, say, extraction of domain information, IP information, who is information. We call these things entities and observables. But for everybody else, it's just attack surface. You take in any tool you want, push it into the data lake, and then you configure the extraction of useful attack surface that the pen testers will now surveil, monitor, and try to break into. The keyword in all of this here is security information event management. That's the tool that needs to be built. Not your SIEM, your SOC currently have. Because I know some of you are thinking and nodding, yeah, we do continuous pen testing. Yeah, our pen testers are like once a week doing some work here and there. I'm not talking about pen testers that are more engaged or more agile. I'm talking about that pen testers need a tool which we label a security information event management system that produces alerts. And these alerts are not like your traditional SOC, where the alert is antivirus. Somebody broke in. No, these alerts are opportunities to hack. Today's bug bounty hunters, some pen testers, and others, their security information event management systems are pipelines of automation and scanning tools and so on. Excel spreadsheets, Recon NG, and so on, free open source tooling that they've made work. But think about that, okay? You need to build the security information event management for pen testers to know what there is to pen test from one day to another. from 1 hour to another. And it's not all about scanning, because the internet is built on events. There are so many event-driven type of alerts. There's a new domain being provisioned. In other words, there's a certificate that has been created. That certificate has a common name, an alternative name, and is immediately published as something called a certificate transparency log. Meaning I don't have to scan you. I simply subscribe to the gigantic CTL log, and I get push notifications when you create a new domain, for example, right? There are try to put this term scanning and intervals, the cron jobs and the scheduled tasks into your luggage of that was the old, and try to go into the world of event-driven designs where things changing on the internet is what triggers you to perhaps launch a scan and so on. But still, I'm not saying you don't need to scan anymore. I'm just saying scanning is complemented with so many other things. One way to scan, for example, is to, hey, you want to scan ports. Different tools can do this, like Nmap, Nabu, and so on. But there are many different ways you can scan. I can, for example, scan all 65,535 ports on your IP address now, and it will take me a long time. I'm going to create quite a bit of noise, right? There's a different way to scan. I can scan your top 578 ports. I can scan the most common ports that are exposed there on the internet, the 578 biggest ones, most common ones, and I will find 90% of all the attack surface on the internet. That might be good enough to scan once a day, twice a day. Or dare I say, hear me out, that the pen testers work with the people on the inside. Something crazy like that, where when deployments happen, the pen testing team is a part of the deployment pipeline. Oh my God, but it's supposed to be red versus blue, right? Now, we'll get there soon. We'll get there soon. Purple teams and so on. Wow, yeah. Here's a screenshot that I just grabbed from one of our, basically part of our SIEM, basically the developments that happen from one day to another. Which outstanding applications do we have? Any observables that we need to take a look at that perspective, figure out what available data we have from all kinds of different tools, and get to work. At the same time, from pen testers' point of view, we are creating we're getting a bunch of really important data. Best practices on web applications, best practices on mail servers. I know that your mail server might not have, for example, sender policy framework properly configured. I'll find that during my pen test operation, okay? I will see, for example, that you don't have strict transport security turned on your HTTP server. But I'm not gonna go scream in your face, Wolf, Wolf, there's a bad thing happening. That's the job of the defensive SOCs. They will make you have alert fatigue, okay? You will have thousands of alerts if you want to, okay? All kinds of false positives. It's not good for many security teams today. I'm not gonna alert on these things. It's security hygiene. Do something about it. But I see it, and I want you to have it. So what I'm telling you is that pen testers generate valuable data that can be now siphoned in to the blue team, to the CISO, and value add. Start to work together. I want to talk about some examples on how well this kind of operation works. Here, for example, one day, Atlassian have a vulnerability, okay? Confluence, it can be hacked. Atlassian wants everybody to patch now because it's critical, right? What happens then is that the clock starts to tick. Immediately, the real threat actors will get to work. They will scan, nay, they'll go to Shodan, who already scanned you, and they will say, show me all the Atlassian Confluence systems out there in the world. Oh, looks like there's quite a bit. Then they will take that patch that they're announcing, and they're going to reverse engineer it. They're going to do something we call bin diffing and patch diffing. They will ask themselves the question, what did they change? What did they patch? Because if they can figure out what kind of things they patched, they might be able to construct a working exploit and then get to work of actually exploiting targets. So this happens today, okay? Well, this happened 2003, 2024, 2023, 24, I don't remember. But when that happens, 2022 actually on the slide, when that happens, pen testers need to ask themselves, so what? I have a new missing patch. Can I get to work? And in this case, we could get to work. One of my pen testers immediately says, I can weaponize this. We weaponize it. We prove to our customers, several of them, there was a little handful of customers where we can demonstrate, not just, hey, you are missing a patch. No, we can demonstrate the effects of confidentiality, integrity, availability. We have popped your server. We have a shell. It's a beautiful black terminal window where I can do anything, okay? You have proof in the pudding. When that happens, and we did that really fast, right? When that happens, customers go like, okay, I need to patch this one really fast. One of my customers, though, unfortunately, they did not, well, let me tell you this way. They said, thank you very much. We're going to patch this as soon as we find the product owner. There's something called ITIL. You know, we have an emergency change advisory board, and there's some processes that we need to follow. Oh, it looks like the process owner is sick. I mean, who are we going to call then? I'm not sure. Anyways, they spent 6 days trying to patch the vulnerability, and that was too slow. After 4 days of Atlassian releasing this patch, real threat actors had weaponized it, and they had actually broken into my customer. We are talking about patching something within hours and days, not weeks and months. If you put something on the internet today, you have to be thinking of, am I ready to patch this within 24 hours? Because if not, then maybe that system cannot or should not be on the internet. That's the world we live in now. This is 2025. We're no longer in dinosaur world of the Stone Age, you know? Threat actors are that fast today. We're talking minutes and hours until people start to knock on your door trying to break in after certain things happen. And pen testers, to provide value, need to do the same. Another example. Here, you're seeing, tiny though, some certificate transparency logs. So when you create a new certificate to support, for example, TLS or cryptography on your websites, you create that certificate and it's publicly announced to the world. We look at those certificate transparency logs as pen testers, bug bounty hunters, and so on do the same. And we look for your brand name, something, something, not .com, no, something, something we look for. And when there's a new certificate, what do? We check the domain names and we try to resolve it. Is there an IP address on this domain? No. What about now? No. All right, what about later? Is there an IP? If there's all of a sudden an IP address, we will scan it. Any ports? No. What about now? Any ports? And once there is a port, for example, in one of my customers, all of a sudden port 80 and 443 is open. And if you know your technical stuff, you know that that's a web server, okay? So what happens then, preferably from automation's point of view, the pen tester will see what's on that website. And in our case, it's a blank website. All right, what about now? Is it still blank? What about in 2 hours? Is it still blank? And in our case, all of a sudden, we see that there's been done a deployment. Developers and IT operations are currently working on the system they're deploying. And we're watching. They don't know it, but we're watching every move. All of a sudden, there's a commercial off-the-shelf system being put into production. Our pen testers, they get to work, they look at the system, and, well, one of them found a folder called /logs. Inside of the logs folder, there was some text files. They clicked the text file and found out that this commercial off-the-shelf product was logging failed username, failed logins, and they were logging the username and passwords in plain text. No kidding. US company, the large company, and they were logging usernames and passwords in plain text. Ask yourselves, was that a complicated hack? Was that hard? We found the super admin password to the vendor of the software, and we found the admin password of the chief of IT over in Texas, US, for our customer in less than 24 hours. Was it hard? Was it advanced? It wasn't at all. It was the most easy thing ever. And that's a reoccurring thing. Hacking and pen testing can be very challenging and complex. In fact, at this hackerspace, we're doing hardware hacking this week, which I would call Basically, it's like a full stack pen test. We have to pen test mobile, hardware, web, cloud, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. Super challenging. But breaking into your company might not be that challenging. It could actually be trivial. And we got to do better from a pen testing point of view. And we have to realize IT is a moving target. jQuery today is a jQuery, different jQuery tomorrow. It changes. Your systems change all the time. Patches, vulnerabilities, credentials leaked. All the time, there are opportunities for pen testers to break in. And, well, we have to look at, basically, I have to have a Sun Tzu quote in this talk here. Okay, Sun Tzu, age-old army general, right? He said the following thing: know yourself and know your enemy, and you will not have to fear the results of 100 battles. You will win. You are in charge if you know what you are made of and you know what the enemy is made of. Can we know ourselves? Asset inventory. Who does the best job of producing asset inventory? You on the inside of your castle? You'll open up the doors you know about? Or the pen testers? The ones who don't care what you look like will find everything. We will find that path least traveled. Offensive SOCs with the SIEM in the middle, with automation and AI together with humans, will allow us to produce sharp and, well, updated asset inventory so we can know ourselves. Next up, knowing the attacker. Look at this cool cat here, right? Love it. Beautiful cat. I want to be this cat. I want to be a cool pen tester. So I need to know the attackers. Is that an impossible challenge? Knowing how to pen test, how to hack? Absolutely not. Check out YouTube tutorials. Check out all the methodologies. Knowing how to hack is not impossible. That's what we do as pen testers. What we have looked at as typically an annual activity or entirely and only for compliance, I hope will stop with the advent and the encouragement of offensive SOCs. APT. The keyword here is persistent. Pen testing, which has unfortunately for years lacked sustained impact and agility. I see pen tests, which are extremely expensive, being delivered by competing companies, where the pen testers, they did their job, they pen tested the front-end application, but they found a back-end and it wasn't in the scope, and they didn't do their job because they don't want to get sued. They don't want to get in trouble. And guess where the vulnerabilities were at? The back-end. Offensive SOCs allows the persistence to be joined in to pen testing. And I really hope that pen testing will start to get a higher impact in its deliveries worldwide, because frankly, we need to do better. Being a cyber criminal is not hard today, okay? It's not challenging to earn money by hacking companies illegally. And we got to stop saying red versus blue, okay? It's archaic. Red team versus blue team, which is an entire different talk, by the way. Isn't this a red team exercise? No, it's not. It's actually an entirely different thing. It's closely related, but it's not. We got to form the purple team. We got to start giving us hugs like these. Warm hugs that blends blue and red, where the blue team give me the asset list. I get the zone transfer. I get the directory listing. Your pipelines inform the red team so we can together make the world and the company a safer place. So we can together make it harder for the threat actors to break in. Love these pictures from ChatGPT, don't you? All right, it's been a fun presentation for me to have for you. I hope it has sparked many questions. I hope it sparked some interesting initiatives, perhaps, maybe even some frustration with the current practices, or maybe it caused you to think, hey, we're nearly there. This is kind of almost what we're doing today, which is amazing, right? And I hope you found it entertaining and engaging. One thing is for certain, we need to do better. You will find the slides on SANS's website. If you want, you can also find them at intobio/Chris Dale. Check out River Security. Know that we're a company that does this kind of operation continuously. I would love to hear from you. And yeah, stay safe out there. I will now glance over to the questions and see if there's any questions. So let's see. All right. Are you there also, Pace? I have the chat. Is there a Q&A button I can click maybe?
Yeah,
I don't see any questions right now.
if we have two questions in here, I can read them to you, or if you click the more down at the bottom of your screen, you might be able to access the Q&A from there.
There is the Q&A. Thank you very much. Sometimes, even the professionals need IT support. Thank you very much. All right. So Marius here has a question. Could you please mention a couple of the leading pen testing tools on the offensive exploitation, maybe open source or commercial, you are using? Beautiful. And that's a great question, Marius, because pen testing is a range of different tools. We use different tools when we pen test a web application on IIS versus on Apache. Yes, there are certain tools that will find vulnerabilities on IIS, which you will not find on Apache. For example, IIS short name scanner or short scan. It will find you basically potential attack surface on IIS, which you would not find on other types of servers. Burp Suite is one of the go-to pen testing tools out there for pen testers today. It's an enterprise type of tool that has a free version of it. But what you need to consider here, okay, is use Burp Suite for web application pen testing and so on. But look into their Mayatoya API and their extension type of way to extend Burp Suite so that it can continuously feed data into your SIEM. Yes, your offensive SIEM. Okay, so Burp Suite, absolutely amazing. Look at Nuclei. Nuclei is a community-driven vulnerability scanning project where you basically put input to the tool and it will scan whatever you input based on templates and configuration. Fantastic tool. And in fact, also check out other tools from Project Discovery, such as Asset Finder, such as Nabu, and others. And today, using nothing but open source tool, you can create some pretty fantastic pipelines that you can run on a scheduled basis to get some pretty nifty attack surface management from a free point of view. So I see more and more questions popping in. Beautiful stuff. So here's from Tim. You said at one point, I'm going to have a sip from my beer. Just a second. Yes, we're having a party. The entire week long, we're having a party. We call it a hackerspace. Mobile hackerspace, like a pop-up hackerspace. It's amazing. Lots of fun. You said at one point that for SIEM, you didn't recommend a traditional sort of SIEM like Splunk ArcSight. What sort of SIEM would you recommend for an OSOC, or would it be custom built job? So I wish I had something like great to tell you here, Tim. But to be honest, I started out with tools, Maltego, for example. I started out with tools like Spiderfoot and others. And these are maybe a throwback to the previous question as well. Check those tools out. They're fantastic. But they weren't good enough, okay? And right now, we are building our own SIEM. So I have 3 developers on the team, full-time employees. All they're doing is building a huge data lake with dozens of different microservices on top of it to facilitate for threat intel platform type of activities, to facilitate for SIEM type of activities, and more. So yeah, maybe check out Maltego. They have a nice little state machine that can run on a scheduled basis, and they can run something called transforms. And you can build out custom transforms if you want to, or you can run your own code against a target attack surface. It might work perfectly for a sole company, but the moment you're going to look at large attack surfaces, it might not be necessarily the best option, or, well, dozens of different companies in different deployments and so on, like we're doing. I wish I had a really good answer for you, but let's see. Arzil here. Can I become a pen tester without giving up my current job? And what should I do or need to learn? Absolutely, you can become a pen tester, and you should take a look at bug bounty programs. Take a look at SANS's networks, for example, where you can hack in a safe cyber range. Take a look at websites like Hack the Box. Take a look at overthewire.org, one of my favorites, WeChild.net, and many, many others, Try Hack Me and so on, provide you with resources and learning opportunities where you can get into pen testing and hacking in a safe and educational way. Abdelhamid, can you elaborate a bit further on Purple Team in contrast to the two separate teams? Absolutely, I can. So we are typically looking at a red team and a blue team, defense and the offense. And I'm saying that these teams in the future will converge. I have no doubts about it, that give it a few years, maybe 5, maybe less, maybe more, we're not going to see an offensive SOC. We're not going to see a defensive SOC. We're going to see one SOC where we have highly talented, skilled people who are doing pen testing and defense basically in one platform. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to make these teams collaborate. We're going to make, for example, pen testers be fueled by input from defenders. One of the things, for example, I use, and you can find an open source tool from Project Discovery that does this, called CloudList. What I do for my customers is I allow my customers to, on their own end, or I can get an account from my automation point of view, deploy a little function as a service in Azure or in AWS. My customers deploy a piece of code that enumerates the entire cloud back office and shares it with the pen testers into my SIEM, so that I get keys to the castle, sort of. So I get the blueprint of the new deployments of the IP addresses that are being created and are being removed. I get a much more dynamic operation in cooperation with the target instead of looking at them as an adversary. Okay? And the same thing applies to so many other things. I'm trying to break into an application. I want the logs. I'll just ask the company, hey, can you provide the logs of this application? I think I found a vulnerability, but I want to check the logs. And they should hand that to me so that we can jointly work towards building safe companies and safe attack surface. And this is honestly something we could talk about, Abdelhamid. We could talk about it probably for the next hour or two. But think of convergence between blue and red and how we can make each other good. One of the ways I make the blue team good is that I expose all their certificate authorities. I expose certificate management things, like which type of certificates are exposed where, when are they going to expire. All of that stuff is information I need as a pen tester, but I can provide it to the blue team so that now all of a sudden certificate management is easily done with your attack surface management provider and your continuous pen testing operation. Great question. Let's see. Then as a follow-up from Tim here, are you talking about all these tools feeding data into a SIEM, and how would you standardize it all? Oh, great. Great. There's some of the secret sauce, okay? That's where the operation comes into play. How do you take all of these tools, whether it's Tenable Nessus, whether it's Qualys, whether it's OpenVAS, Nuke and so on, vulnerability scanners, how do you take cyber threat intelligence from all kinds, take that in, and then take data, valuable pen testing data out of it, so that data is transformed into actionable data and data that can be even used by other tools again, as part of pipelines the pen testers might set up. So remember my slide on the data lake. We standardize on JSON objects. We take data from any tool, like maybe, say, for example, Nabu or any tool, make it return JSON, either translate it or the tool returns JSON directly, put it into the data lake, and then you configure querying on top of the data lake. We use a query language called JamesPath, but you might have heard of tools like JQ. These are tools that understands JSON. And we can then go into any arbitrary data and start to configure and extract out entities. So domains, users, usernames, credentials, and more from that data that a tool have returned. And once we extract out entities and even what we call observables, which are basically how we describe an entity. So, for example, a web server, a web server has different web applications. Web applications are entities, and on those web applications, we have observables like HTTP status codes and headers and so on. But that whole thing, yes, needs to be developed and built. And I hope in the future that we might be able to open source parts of our SIEM to give back to the community. But at the moment, it's not in a state where we can open source it. Great question, so Tim. Good job. Fugner, we're also at 6 o'clock here, so we'll do this final question here. There are some cool info from cert page issuer. And what about the self-signed domains? Right. If you didn't get your question answered, by the way, reach out to me on Blue Sky, on X, on LinkedIn. I'll gladly engage in other questions if you approach me. Okay, don't worry about it. But let's see. Cool information from certificates. Yes, about the page issuer and so on. What about some self-signed domains? So ideally, we find this information, right? And then we can basically let our customers and our targets know that, hey, you're using self-signed domains over here. It's probably not best practice. Maybe set up some Let's Encrypt certificates, free ones, at the very least to get rid of the warnings that your users will see when they try to visit the website. Such websites could be used for all kinds of malicious purposes if we're not careful. So certificates, yeah, they have a lot of cool information in them. Check out the website cert.sh, crt.sh. Search for percentage.nameofyourcompany.com or .no.de, whatever, and see what certificates you can find on yourself. And you might be surprised about information, about the amount of information you will find. Great questions, everybody. Love talking to you. Reach out to me on social media and we can engage even more, okay? So thank you for listening and thank you for all the engagements.